So here I will show you what are the things we are going to cover today.
Mm,
So if you see
yeah,
here,
and Alok, is it anywhere you can just write brief notes? Like it's yesterday forgot to create one GitHub registration, or you want me to write down something?
okay, at the end of the session, we will write it down.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay. So today I'm going to cover this topic from initially we will
Because
start.
to listen all this, I have to read. I have to listen all the videos again. So I think if you could share me a little bit of notes, uh, what we have to do, then it's easy for me.
Yeah, at the end of session we will write.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So yesterday, I mean, quick recall. I will give you the quick recall first. What we have done yesterday.
Yeah.
So yesterday we have just imported one predefined template Spring Boot application from Spring initialization. And if you remember, we have just added three dependencies there. First for starter web, second for dev tool, and third one is for S2 database. Just we have added three dependency only. And now
Yes.
today, what we will understand here, we will understand the Spring Boot configuration, annotations in Spring Boot, and what are the Spring modules in the Spring Boot, and what is the dependency injection. First, we will understand this topic. Then afterwards, we will go for further slides. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me start with the Spring configuration first. So this was our project which we have created. In the source main Java, you will see there is one file. The by default file was created by the Spring. The file name is ATS training application. So this file you will see here in this file. The file, this class will be marked as a @Spring Boot application annotation. So first we will understand what is the meaning of this annotation. So as the name suggested, boot means the entry point of your application. So whenever this application will run, the entry point will be from this class only. It is your booting point of the application. So here you will see there is one method. It is a main method, and inside the main method we are calling a run method, which is comes from Spring Boot and the class name itself. So we have nothing created till now, any configuration. We are just leaving the by default configuration towards the Spring, but later on we will add a couple of configuration here, and those configuration I will explain you one by one. So this is clear. What is this class and what is the annotation of Spring Boot application?
Yes.
Okay. Now talking about the annotation in Spring Boot. So if we are working on Spring Boot, there are predefined annotations are available, and those annotations are just we can use those annotation for their different purposes. So what are those annotations? So we will thoroughly see all this annotation while creating this application, and I will explain the each and every annotation of the uses of that particular annotation at the same time. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Spring Boot modules. What are the Spring Boot modules? So here I will explain you here. Let me write it down some modules of Spring Boot. So there are a couple of Spring Boot module. First is Spring Core, then Spring Security, okay, Spring JPA, then Spring. I'm writing just Spring. You can consider it Spring Boot since we are working in Spring Boot, and Spring, sorry, transactions, or you can say AOP. Spring JMS. So you see here, these are some modules are available in the Spring Boot. There is core module there, security module, JPA also, transactions, AOP, and JMS. What are these modules? So Spring Core is just like old one Spring, what we were using for dependency injection like auto wiring, qualifiers. Then there are so many annotation like at the rate service, at the rate component, those kind of annotation we will see in the Spring Core module. Basically it is extensively using by creating your beans, automatically creating beans, inject the dependencies, creating the service classes, creating a component, and many more things are available in Spring Core. Spring security, you might hear about, like you might heard about, like we use properly for authentication and authorization when we create some API, so we want to make it secure. In that scenario, what we do, usually we create some JWT token or maybe some Spring basic authorization or authentication mechanism using the Spring security module. Also for login utility purpose also, we need some functionality to authorized and authenticate that request where the user is valid or not. Okay, so that
Yeah.
module also we will learn. Afterwards, there is another module, this called Spring JPA. Spring JPA is nothing but it's like a Java Persist API. Mainly we use it to communicate with database through the program. Program means the Java application. And inside the Java application, we will write some repository code and entity classes there to map the table and Pojo classes. That module we will see today. Okay. And talking about AOP, to Spring has provided some programmatical transaction as well as custom transaction. If you want to handle it like by default transaction, there are some annotation like at the rate transactional, and there are four or five mechanism like supported, not supported, transaction, new, required, read only. Those mode we will see in the transactions. And AOP is the different kind of customization where you can use cutoff and other kind of transaction mechanism to maintain the transactions. So are you aware of what is the transactions?
Yeah.
And Sukir, do you know about transaction?
No, look.
So basically this transaction follow four property. If you know, like I'm writing here acid. So these are the four property. Acid property. Acid property means, if you see the full form of acid, A means atomicity, C means consistency, I means isolate, and D means durability. So these four having the property of transaction. When you perform any DML operation on the database or any kind of DSL operation in the database, you have to make sure that transaction must be isolated with another transaction. Like if two user calling the same table at the same time, so their transaction should be isolated to each other. So if one transaction is trying to manipulate data into the table, then another transaction has to wait unless and until the first transaction complete its execution. By means, it means the time the table will be locked. Afterwards, after committing the first transaction, other transaction will get write access on that table. Okay.
Okay.
And last one is JMS. So JMS is nothing but it's a messaging service. We can use ActiveMQ, and also we can implement using the Spring JMS implementation. But instead of following this JMS, we will go in more advanced. We will learn the Kafka. So Kafka is like substitute of JMS, but that is more advanced. All right. Now I will show you the JPA implementation. So this is, I already explained you. So this is our today's topic, Spring Boot JPA implementation. Here, if you see here, there are a couple of JPA annotations which we have to understand. Then what is the entity classes? What is repository classes? Then we will see CRUD operations. Afterward, we will see this interfaces, CRUD repository versus JPA repository. Then we will see the named query, native query. Then afterwards, mapping in JPA. What are the mappings like one to one, one to many? Those mappings also we will see here. And afterward, database configuration. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get started now for JP implementation. So few things we have to follow when we start with Spring JPA. So let me quickly create some packages and classes, then I will explain you each and everything. Do you have any kind of kind of application in your mind? So now just we are just in initial mode. So afterwards
Mhm.
we will uh, stretch that application at enterprise level. So if you have some I mean any idea, like maybe we can go for order and items, or maybe we can use some kind of another
Payment.
business. Payment also we can use. So
Yeah.
you want to use payment?
Yeah.
Okay. So as a business analyst, you have to help me, right? Banking domain, I never worked on it. So all the entity I will ask you, okay?
Okay.
What are the fields and what are the modules we have to take? All right.
Otherwise, is there anything which you have worked?
I worked like so many things apart from this. I know healthcare, insurance. I know this one,
We can go for the insurance.
and yeah, we can go for insurance as well. So
Yeah.
even Sufir is also working in insurance domain, right, Sufir?
Yes, in healthcare domain, healthcare insurance.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, healthcare domain. Yeah.
Yes.
So can you suggest some class or table name which we have to follow? Sufir?
Um, you mean modules?
Modules. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. I can.
Yeah.
The modules we are using like member details, transaction details,
Okay.
and then summary transactions,
Okay.
like those kind of modules we are using.
Okay. So let's start with member module first. Okay. So I will create one entity class for member details. Okay.
Okay.
And this will go in your model package. So I've simply created one Java class. Here we will see now we have to create this class as an entity class. Now, what is the meaning of entity class? So in JPA, you will mark a class as an entity which you wanted to make as a table in your database. So there
Okay.
is one annotation which call entity. See here. So you can see here, now I am not seeing this entity annotation. Why I am not seeing the entity annotation? Because I did not add the dependency for Spring JPA. So what we have to do, we have to add one more dependency here for Spring JPA. So again, we have to go in Maven, and then we'll have to download Spring JPA dependency. Spring JPA dependency. So to enable Spring JPA implementation, we have to add this dependency. And I have added this dependency here. Now I think we will see this annotation. Let me check. It's downloaded or not? 1 minute.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So instead of using this dependency, we have to use this one, starter one, Spring Data JPA. Let me remove this comment. Why it's not? Yeah, it's coming now. So see here, this annotation, it should come from JavaX persistent package. Okay. This one we have to use. And this class should be marked as an entity. Then we have to use another annotation, that name is table. Again, it should come from JavaX persistence. And here we can give the table name as well. Name equal to our table name. We can keep it like as member details. So any doubt here till now? We just marked is this table as an entity and the table. Why we do use this two annotation? Because we want to map this class as a table in database. Now I have to add some fields inside this class. So let me add some fields. Private long member ID. Okay. What are the details, Sukhvir? Can you help me?
DOB.
BOB,
Yeah, string we can write name.
name, member name.
Yes.
Okay. Then,
Date of birth.
okay. I'll put it BOB. Okay.
Nationality.
Okay.
Then we can add social security, SSN.
Okay.
Then we can add address.
Okay. All right.
Plan ID.
So this is a string or a integer?
Integer.
Integer. Okay.
I think
Then
that's fine. We can add group number if you want. Group
this is
number is
also
also integer.
okay. SSN is also integer or string?
Yes. Integer.
All right. So you remember You remember we had created setter and getters also yesterday, right?
Yes.
Right. Here also we need to create setters and getters. So I will go here in source and generate setters and getters, and I'll select all. But still we need to add some annotation more, since this is simple class now, but we have to tell to JPA what is the primary key in this table. Now we are considering as a table, so we have to add some annotation like @ID. Okay, then also we have to add some another annotation like generated value, and here we have to tell strategy, and it should be generated type dot identity. Now I will explain you what is this. So first of all, we are making this column as a primary key. Then we have to tell JPA this column is going to become primary key for this table member details. Then therefore we have added this annotation @ID. Then primary key, sometimes we keep it like auto incremental. It can be from program or it can be from database side. This concept, do you know or not?
Yeah.
So whenever we insert the record for member details, every time we don't need to pass the primary key. By default, it will be taken care by the database if we are using the identity generation type. So let's say I have inserted one record. So first time it will create from 1. When I add the second record, then afterwards it will add it by default as a 2 because it is auto incremental.
So in generate type, how many
Yeah.
variants are there, like apart from identity?
Apart from identity, you will see the auto,
Auto,
first auto
identity, auto.
sequence,
Auto
and then
also
table.
will generate automatically, no?
If you select this one, what will happen?
Yeah.
Auto, this will be taken care by this Java program. So this will taken care by Spring framework. And whenever the request come to this application, so what will happen? This application will auto increment that ID from this application. But this is not a recommended one. Why?
Okay.
Can you tell me why it is not recommended one?
Because sometimes you may start from 200 and
So logic here, why we don't want to use auto here from Java program? Let's say you are managing this auto incremental from Java program, and sometimes what happen? You have 10 records in your table now, okay,
database.
database, and now someone come to your database and he inserted some data. That guy inserted some data from the database from backend side. Now the sequence can be messed up.
Okay.
Second, this is the one reason. Second reason can be you have like a couple of reason. A couple of requests can come at the same time, right? In that scenario also, we cannot rely on this mechanism. So better to manage this mechanism from database side. Therefore, it is identity. So identity means now program will not manage this auto incremental part. Only database will manage this identity auto increment part.
Okay. Apart from that, we have seen some more, no? Auto, identity, and what else?
Sequence also you can create in database. You can create your own sequence. If you want to use this sequence, what will happen? You have to create one sequence in the database, and that sequence will be called by this table, and auto increment part will be handled by the sequence, right? In database,
Yeah, yeah,
it is also
yes.
used for incremental values. So for now we are going to use this identity only. Okay.
Okay.
What is that generate type is table?
Table, you can directly apply this strategy on table itself. While creating the table, you can apply this mechanism from table as well. So do you remember, like there is one syntax for create table. So here let me show you. Create table auto increment primary key. Create table auto increment primary key Oracle. Yeah. So in database side, we can also tell to in the table itself this primary key, like not here. Let me show you primary key auto increment. There is one syntax. I'm searching that syntax here. See here. If you are creating a table, you can also provide an identity, right?
Yeah.
And this is your primary key. So it means it will be auto increment by table itself. So identity and table are similar. But I never used, so I'm not sure exactly what it is. But yeah, the recommended one is identity one. So therefore, I'm giving you the knowledge on this identity part.
This one more is there, no? I generate type apart from identity, table,
Fourth,
class.
no, this is not. This is not a strategy. If you see only 4 generated types coming from generated type, this is just dot class. You can type any dot class. Dot class doesn't have any auto increment functionality. Only you have 4 mode.
नाही नाही मी क्लासमध्ये आहे ना 5 मिनिटामध्ये कॉल कर अशी येत मी बोलते त्या कॉल कर म्हणून ठेवून टाक हे सॉरी
Yeah, no problem. So this is not a auto increment strategy. Okay, this is just a
Okay.
dot class. Only you have 4 auto increment strategy. Okay.
Okay.
So this is clear now.
Yes.
Why we are using generated value annotation and why we are using ID. Now we have successfully created our entity class. Okay. Now the time is to come. We have to write repository classes. So for this particular class, we have to write one repository. So how we will create? Let me show you. Sorry. So in JPA, we always create repository in interfaces, not in class. So it's a member detail. Sorry.
Is it okay? Because there the spelling you have given different in here. Is it okay?
You mean details?
Yeah, details you have given
We can
different
see.
name. A spelling. I think you have given D-A.
Oh, I will clear. I will make it.
Okay.
That is just a typo mistake. Okay.
Yeah.
We can rename it because this is typo mistake. Okay. So here you are seeing now I'm going to make this class as a repository. So few things I have to do here. First thing, I have to mark this class as a repository. Okay. So there is another annotation which comes from the Spring this package you see here. This is the package, and now this is the way to create your repository. When you want to create any repository, you have to mark that class with the @repository annotation. Afterwards, we have to implement another. We have to extend an interface here. That name is JPA repository, and here we have to tell what kind of parameter for which entity class we are going to create this repository. So you remember we have created member details entity.
Yeah.
So here we have to write entity name and Here we have to pass the ID. So if you see here, the ID data type is long here, correct?
Yeah.
Our ID, primary key is member ID and its data type is long. So same data type I have to pass here. Okay. And now it's done. Nothing we have to do. Now by default CRUD operation is coming. And if I'll open this JPA repository, you will see the all methods here. Find all, find all, find all by ID, and
How
save
did you
and
get
flag.
this one? Repository
So
class.
this class, just press
Yeah.
the control and click. Control and click. You have to press the control and just click on it.
Okay.
Okay. So you can see the implementation of this interface.
So
So it
this is
has,
already existing one class.
yeah, this is coming from this Spring only. See here.
Library.
Yeah. Spring data JPA repository. Okay. So we are just using, and it came from Spring data JPA package. Okay. So if we have extended this interface in our repository interface, then we don't need to write all this CRUD operation again. Okay. If you want to use generic ones, whatever the Spring has implemented, but if you want to modify, we can, then in case we have to write our own custom query. That part we will see in later part. Okay. Now it's clear. How did we
Complete.
create repository? Sukhi, do you have any doubt?
It is little bit confusion to me.
Yeah, you can ask the question.
Is member repository.
Let me pause the recording and then we can. So this repository has got created now. Now we have to create a service class, and after service class, we will see some annotation again, and we will create a controller class, and we will check. Before doing all those things, we have to configure our database property as well. And to configure your database, we need to do some configuration inside this application property file. Can you see this application property file here?
Yes.
So it comes under the resource folder. And why do we need to configure database? Because when we want to interact any database, we have to mention all those properties of that particular database related their URL, JDBC URL, driver name, and the username, password, all those things we have to define inside this class. Okay. Not class, this is the property file. So I have created here predefined. Let me tell you, you can also get it from internet as well. These are the predefined properties you see here. I'll copy paste. So it will save our time. So I will explain you one by one what are these property. So first of all, I have enabled the S2 database console. So you remember we have added the S2 dependencies for in memory database. So to see the particular that S2 database on browser, we have to add these two lines. We added, and afterwards we have to add some database properties. So by default, this property comes from Spring. So this syntax, this is the key and this is the value. If you add something in property file, so by default that property maintain the whole thing like this. This called left hand side is key and right hand side it's called value. Okay. So this is the this one will be your database URL. This is your driver class name. So since we are using S2, we have to add S2 driver, and the username password can be anything for S2 database. And also these are the properties of your JPA. To show SQL, means when we run the application, we will see this SQL running SQL in our console. Therefore, I make it as a true. Then dialect. So dialect concept is nothing but when you interpret your program with any kind of database, you have to provide a dialect. Dialect is just like an interpreter between your application and database. I know this is little bit boring theory, but you have to understand this part. And another one is this property is Spring JP Hibernate DDL Auto. So it means like update. So there are few modes, like you can create, you can keep it as a create, you can keep it as a delete, you can keep it as a update. So if you are keeping it as an update, it means by default it will see if you have table is already created, it will update it. If your table is not created, it will create for you. So in production mode, by default we keep it as update. Otherwise, if you create it like, if you keep it like create, every time it will delete all previous record and it will create new. Okay, so these properties are clear or not? This is just for just database connection properties, nothing. I did not define anything new. This would be your database URL. How you create, like you see here, you have like Oracle. So usually when you create a connection, what you have to do when you create here like this, so if you click on this plus icon, what happened? There is one pop-up window will come, and then you will see something, you know, the- all connection detail you have to provide. Why it is not working?
Need to enter username, password, database name, right?
Yeah, same way, because this is also an interface, right? So this is your user interface, and these are your database. See here, here you will see you have to tell the database name, then you have to pass the username, you have to give the password, then you have to provide an host name, port, and then as SID. Afterwards, you will save the records, right? You will connect to the database. Same thing you have to tell to program as well. If you want to connect with database, you have to provide URL. So this is your JDBC URL. This is your database name. This is your IP address. This is your S2 JDBC URL. This is your IP, and this test DB is your DB name. Okay.
This all we can put in environment, right?
Yes, we can put it in environment. If you have environment, definitely you can put it in environment. Now we are
Because
developing in.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, because the names could be different. So if we are going to put in the environment,
Yes. So that property also we will create here. Now we have
okay,
just created only one file, right? Now afterwards, when we expand this project, we will see there are four property here. Dev property different, test property will be different, and prod property will be different. Okay.
okay.
And that is called profiling. So that profiling we will understand later on. So this part, do you have any doubts, or so far we
Mm,
are good?
yeah,
Okay, so I'm closing this one now, and now I'm going to create our service class. So database configuration done, repository class got created, and then we have to create now service class. So member detail service, member, sorry, details, members, not member detail, member details, service, and package would be service. Member details service. Okay, and it should be an interface, not class. Party ID, right, Sukhvir?
Yeah.
So we will change this implementation later also, because now I will just deal with the entity objects, but later on we will create separate request and response object. Okay.
Well, okay. What do we have to put under repository and service classes?
So what is
Like in
this?
entity class, we have defined all the entities, right? And what
Yes.
about repository and the service?
So in the repository, we will keep all repository here. Okay.
Okay.
So now we have member details. So for member details, we will create member repository. Let's say afterwards we will create some plan model. So after plan model, so model will be go in the plan model package, and then repository for plan will go inside this package. So all repository will be here, all service classes here. So we are decoupling the all packages. Is that your question, or what was you have another doubt?
No, I was asking how do we know what data should under what class? Like we are creating here service class, right?
Mhm.
So what we have to put under service classes? Like what data we need to write here?
Ideally, so where in service class we uh, ideally we already, I mean, here also we have to define the CRUD methods, but
Okay,
but the only difference will be in the service class. There would be more method more than the CRUD classes, because here we will not provide the same object what we are receiving from database. We will change it later. We will create a response payload here, not the member detail. We will not pass the directly pass our entity. We don't want to show outside the world what is the our entity values and all. Okay. So for that, we will create a request object separate and response object separate. So this service class will return the response object instead of this entity class. But it's a beginning of this project. I will clear one by one your concepts. So now I'm
okay,
just keeping this entity class. So instead of entity class, we will we will return the response class, not entity class. Okay. And instead of passing this member details, again we are passing the entity class right here in the create member. We will
yeah,
not use no longer use this member detail object. Instead of, we will use the request object. So we will create a separate member detail request object instead of this.
okay,
Okay. I mean, did I clear your doubt?
yes,
Okay. So we just had created interface. Now we have to create its implementation as well. Okay. So in the implementation, I have to choose class. I have to use the name of like this IMPL, and then package would be also IMPL. Okay. So created class here. I have to implement that interface. Just I created one, and see here there is some warnings and compilation errors. then what we have to do, we have to click on this add unimplemented method. Okay. So why do we need to do this? Because when you implement any interface, you have to implement all the methods which has been defined inside the interface. It's clear? So coming to now another annotation, there will be one another annotation now we will see @service annotation. See here. So this service annotation, why do we need? Because we are going to create this class as a service class. Then we have to tell again Spring that we are going to use this class as a service, and inside this class we can keep some dependency as well, like autowire or dependency injection. So again you will see another annotation autowire here, autowired. Now I have to keep that repository object here, member detail, member details, and then member details again. So let me explain you
Hey,
what
how
I
to
have done here.
remember all this we have to create?
This is a generic way, Renu. Like I mean, you have to do practice few times, then you will get to know. This is very small thing. Now you are thinking like, why this annotation? Why this annotation? But if you practice 2 or 3 times, I believe you will understand this concept, because this is
Okay.
like a generic concept for every and each and every application. There are like you will see this kind of implementation or little bit difference you will see. Okay.
Mhm.
Most of the time you will see this implementation, and this is like an easy way to create your all CRUD and DAO layer and the service layer. But in this service class, you have to remember this one. First thing you have to remember @service annotation. Then, sorry, I done different wrong thing here. Let me correct one. This is the entity or the @. Sorry. This is your repository, not entity class. So this would be your repository. Okay, that's cool. So inside the service class, we have to inject the dependency for your database class. Your database class is your repository class. Why do we need this repository in service class? Because in service class we will call this method, this repository methods inside this method, and we will update the record according our requirement. So let's say I'll do one thing first. I will simply create some few records. So get all members. So what I will do, I will copy this repository object from here. I will paste here in return statement and dot find all. Simple, nothing. Then get member by ID. Again, I will return, instead of return null, I will copy this object. I will call this method get by ID. Can you see here get by ID?
Yeah.
There is one more method, find by ID. Okay,
Right there.
find by ID also there from CRUD repository. So better to use this one, find by ID. Let me use this one because it is returning the optional object. That is good one. So let's use this find by ID, and I'll pass the member ID. What you can do here, so it will return, this method will return the optional of member details. So in optional, what you can do, you can check whether data is present or not. Members dot is present. There is one method is present. Okay, is present you can use. If in case that member is present, it is not null, what you can do, simply you can return this object from here, return member dot get. That's it. Here you can keep it null, no problem. In case if it is not present, then you can directly return null. Okay.
Don't
Something
we
is
need to put else here?
If it
not.
is passing the wrong value.
Yeah, let's say if you pass, or Subir, I will clear your doubt as well. So let's say you have passed the member ID, wrong member ID. It is not available in database. Okay. So this method will go to database, check member ID is available or not. So if it is not available, means this object is null. There is no value inside it, right? So null
Yeah.
means it's not present. So it is not present. It will not go inside this block. And by defaultly, it will come to this return block and return the null value.
I want to present the actual value, what it is.
So let's say if it is the member IDs persist in database, you have passed this method. Now this will return the whole object, this one. Okay. And this object has detail for member details. I will debug it and I will show you. But
Okay.
for now, you can understand when you pass the real ID, which is present here, then you will receive this object, and this method will return true because the data is available. Member details data is available in this object. Then you can simply call member dot get. So when you call member dot get, it will return this object, and you can, that's what you are returning from your method, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Sukhvir, coming to your question, if you add else here, and
Mhm.
then in the else you want to write this part, correct?
Yes.
So that is also same, but unnecessary we are adding some block, right? We don't need it.
Okay.
Our code was, the previous one was doing the same, like else condition. You see here, if this is not present, it will directly come to this one. If it is
Okay.
present, that block will not never call, right, this statement,
Yes.
because it will go inside and return the value here only.
Understand. So if we have three conditions, then we need to enter else, right?
Yeah. If you have like couple of condition, then in case you can add else condition.
Okay.
Okay, guys, do you need 5 minute break? You can take it.
Yes,
Then we will.
yes, yes.
So, is there any doubt? Please ask me. Don't hesitate to ask the doubt. I can clear your doubts. If we are good till now, then I'll go ahead and I'll show you another methods and
Okay.
functionality. Okay. So here I'm not touching this method because this will be, we will handle by the named query, native query, and that concept is I will clear later on, not now. So I'm keeping it like on hold, this method implementation. For now, create member we will write. So for create member also, again, we have to call this method, service method. Here, I will pass like this, save. There is one method, direct method inside here. We have seen in the JPA repository, all methods are there. Since we are creating the member record, now we have to call the service save method. Okay. And inside the save method, we will pass this object. It's done. So this create also done. Now we can create delete method also. Dot delete here. But before passing delete, we have to get the object as well. We have only member ID. So what we will do, we will call this method again, get method. You remember we have done this implementation. So I can do one more thing, but let's do it now for time being. We don't need this written statement. If member is present, then we have to delete that object and member.get. Okay. So here As a request parameter, we have member ID. But what we have to do using that member ID, first we have to check whether data is available or not. If someone is passing to delete some data for a particular member, so first we have to verify that data is available in database or not. So we are calling this method find by ID. We are getting that object. We are checking here whether it is present or not. If it is present, then delete that record. Okay. And here, if the data is not available, so now Sukhvir, we can write here else condition. Okay. So you can throw an exception from here, throw an exception, new exception, and that exception should be entity not found exception. So I think, let me check, it is here, not, or 1 second, it's got stuck. So see, we have this exception, right? Entity not found exception, and we can pass our custom message request object is not available. Okay. So this service class implementation done, except this party ID. This one I will later explain you. But apart from that, we have created all those records. Let me recall all those things
So I have one
again.
question. Look, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you scroll down?
Yes.
So instead of putting throw new entity not found exception, can't we just enter return and then our message?
Sukhvir, since this method type is void, can you see here?
Okay.
But if you want to, if you see, this is our, if this is our implementation, we can make it according to our requirement. Okay. Now, if you're saying me, look, I want to, instead of throwing a message, I want to give some message. So what I have to do, I have to change its implementation in interface. I will go here in service class. Instead of void, I will write a return type like this string. Okay. I changed it. Now what I will do, I have to return the statement here. Now I will comment this one. I will return this one like this. Whatever you were saying, like instead of
Request object is not available.
we
Yes.
can like this only instead of throwing, and I'm like this. And also I have to add one more return statement here, because since we have deleted here, so request object has been deleted. Okay. Deleted, and instead of void, we have to return here string. Okay. See,
But
now
it's still reading the member is present condition, right? So why we are entering here request object has been deleted?
let me 1 minute. Now its else part is also not required. So you can do one thing. Yeah. Now tell me your question.
In the first condition, if member is present,
Uh-huh.
then a return. If a member is present, then a return request object has been deleted.
Correct. See,
Okay.
you have to keep your behavior same for everything.
Okay, so
Now,
we are deleting member ID here, right?
yeah, we are deleting member ID. So now we are passing a string message instead of nothing. We are passing something. So whenever you delete the object, you have to tell, you have to return some statement, because this
Okay.
method type is a string. So now what we are
Yes.
written, the object has been deleted successfully. Second one,
Okay.
in case this code will not execute due to the object was not present, then what will happen? We have to tell again that message, object is not available. Okay. But don't worry about this part. This is very generic implementation. We will come once we will create some response payload for each and every method. Okay. So we don't need to write this custom message. We don't need to throw an exception. What we will do, instead of, we will put the our error message inside the response body. Okay. But to understand now how JPA works, I'm just creating the basic implementation. If I will add everything is like an advanced level, then you will get confused. So I cleared your doubt or not, Sukhir? Please confirm me. I think you're
Yes,
on
it's
mute.
hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear it.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay. Alright. So here one thing is pending now. I have to mark this class as a @service because this is a service class. So we have to keep it this annotation here, service class. And also let me again give you the again understanding what we have done so far. First, we have created repository class. So I think in the repository class, there is no doubt what we have done here. We just marked it as a @repository. We have created this class, this interface, because this is a repository class. And then we have extended this word. This word means this interface, that is a JPA repository. In the JPA repository, we had passed the entity object name and the along with the ID data type. Okay, this is the repository class. Now when you created the repository, afterwards you have to create your service class. So for service class, again we have created another interface, and we have kept all these methods. And these methods, what we are going to implement in again a class, which is the implementation of this interface. So the class here, that class has implements this interface here. This class has marked it as a @service. And now the main thing is, in this class we inject the dependency for this repository which we have created, member details repository. Why did we do this auto wiring here? Because we wanted to use this repository object inside this service class. Therefore we auto wired this repository. Auto wiring is nothing but it's same like you create new instance for a class or object. That is the same thing in in the Spring. You can inject the dependency using the auto wired. Okay. So once you created auto wired this object, now we can call this methods for this repository. If it is all member details, you can directly call find all. If it is a find by ID, you can directly call find by ID. Okay. And if it is a save method, then you can directly call save your object. You can pass your object inside the save method. And delete you have seen here. So if you have doubt, please let me know. Otherwise, I will create another class to call this final implementation. No doubt. So let me create now our endpoints in REST controller. So the controller name would be member detail controller, member details controller. Controller, and the package would be, we can keep it like web or API, anything you want. Let me put like API. So first of all, when you want to create your control, so let me give you a few understanding before going into deep in controller class. Controller class are those classes where we create methods for an endpoints for an RESTful API. So by using this controller, we can expose our services. So services exposing means you can create few methods, type of get method, post method, put method, and that get or put method can be called through the client. So client can be anything, your UI application, your postman, and it can be another system. Okay. So now I will create this REST controller. So we have to use again one new annotation that is called REST controller. Okay. I'm going very fast. Just let me know. Otherwise, I will go very, I mean, in normal pitch. Here also we have to inject dependency. Now we have to inject dependency for service class. So what I will do, member service, service, and here we have to inject and dependency, not inject, yeah, inject and dependency using auto-wired. And I'll create one endpoint, simple endpoints. First endpoint we will create find all, or maybe create for create record. Create member record, and payload would be, it can be, it is member details only. So to receive payload from client, you have to use another annotation that is called request body annotation. Then member details. This class will be marked as a request mapping, or instead of request mapping, you can tell what kind of request it is. So we have like this, we are keeping this request as a post method. So we can keep it like post method. And here you can simply give the method name like this, create record, create, that's it. And top of this you can keep request mapping, and here you can give member. So let's test first this record whether it's working or not. I will start the application, and we'll see it's working or not. So to start the application, you have to come here and just right click on this file, click on run as in the Java application. So once this server will start, you will see some logs on console. So see here, Spring application is going to start now. And here you will see the server details. So you can see here Tomcat has started on port 8080, correct? So port number you can see. So to insert the record inside the database, what we will do first, we will check whether this has created our database or not. Okay. So for that, you see here in the logs, S2 console is available at S2 UI path. So what I will do, I will call this, I will open this console here. It will be available my localhost 8080, and then S2 UI, and JDBC URL I have to change here from my code. So where we kept it, you remember, we have kept it in our application.property file. So this is the JDBC URL. I will copy from here. I will put here. This is the JDBC URL. I will test the connection. Test connection is successful. Now we have to connect with this database. So can you see here, this table got created here, member details automatically.
Yes.
And here you will see in this table, we have those ID, address, date of birth, group number, member name, nationality, plan ID, SSN. It's coming, right? But if you run this table, there would be no data. I'll run it. See, because we haven't added any data yet, correct?
Yeah.
We just created a table through our program only. Now we will create a data. For to create a data, what we will do, we will use the endpoints. So the endpoints we have created for creating member records is this. You see here, member, then create, same thing we have to call it from Postman. What I will do, I will keep it like this. Our request type is post. So how do you know this is post? This is the post mapping, okay? And since it is running on localhost, so in the localhost and port number, you know this port number is 8080, right? Here I showed you this port is 8080. Then after localhost, we have to use 8080. Then we have to use this mapping member, and here we will pass member and then slash. It become now this create URL. We are calling this create URL. So this will come here. Okay. Any doubt so far?
No.
Okay, cool. Here as a request body, we are passing this object. Can you see here? As a request body, we are passing member details. So from Postman also we have to use body. We have to pass some data from Postman. So in the Postman, you will see this option body. Then you have to select this raw option. And here there is one drop down. You have to select as a JSON. Okay. And there is now this, you will see this area, this here you have to pass your payload. So payload, what would be your payload? Payload means data. You have to pass some data. So data will be this object, member details. So how will you create this object in JSON? Because you have to pass this data as a JSON from Postman. You see, remember we have selected JSON here.
Yeah.
So I will convert this data into JSON. I will do it quickly in Notepad. See here how we can create the JSON object here. Let's remove this one. Put double quotes, colon, member ID. I think member ID you don't need to pass because it will be taken care by, you remember? It will be taken care by JPA only, auto increment, remember?
Yeah.
I'll create payload quickly. What do you pass? US citizen?
As USA.
USA. Okay. So I created this payload. I have to pass in here. Okay, what is the problem here? Okay, okay. So let's call this API now. So here you will see 200, right? It means
Yes.
success.
Okay.
Okay. So let's see in our database. We should have this object now in database. Can you see here?
Yeah.
It means our create API is working fine. And the connection what we have created, that is completely working fine. It is creating our table and it is inserting data as well. And you remember, I did not pass the member ID. It by default it coming one. Can you see here?
Yes.
The payload, I did not pass member ID. Correct. Now I will add another record. Let me change the name. Alok, and I will pass like this Indian, and I will pass like this Mumbai. Now let me send this record again 200, right? This time also I did not pass member ID. Let's see the record now. See, the record got created. Member ID is 2, address is changed, member name is changed. Okay, the information whatever we are passed, it's working fine. Same thing, if you add multiple couple of records, it will take, you don't need to worry about your primary key records. So it will work every time. You don't need, think you are in New York, right, Sukhir?
See.
And why? Okay, Sukhir records also inserted. So how it is working now? So do you want me to add more API now, or you want to see next time, or you want to do some practice on this, or
More
how it?
APIs like
More API means like we have just create one now. Now we have to create
okay.
get all, or
Yeah,
shall I create it?
you can create, yes.
Yeah, it will not take too much time. I will just
Yeah.
create quickly. Okay. So public, and then list of object we have to call. So for list of object, we have member entity, member details, and get all members. There would be no request body here. Simply you have to call this one in return statement, return dot get all members. That's it. And mapping would be get mapping. This time we
Get.
will use get mapping. Okay. Since we are getting record, then mapping would be get.
Yes.
And the
To
payload
insert
name,
record in the database, we need to use post. To get the record from database, we need to choose get, right?
exactly, Sukhvir.
Okay.
You clear, Renu, this concept, what Sukhvir told you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So now we'll call get member. The endpoint name would be like this, get member, members, members. Now members. Why members? Because more than one members. So I'll do one thing. I'll save this record. I'll see here. I don't need to restart the server, Sukhvir, because you remember
Yes. We need
whenever.
add Spring Boot, right? Spring Boot starter.
So now if you see here, I will refresh this data. This data will gone after the saving the data. Again, you see here, because this is the temporary database. I remember I told you, see
Yeah.
Yeah.
data. So I have to insert some data again quickly. One data, second data, third data, and fourth data. Okay, let me verify this data again. 4 data should be there. Yeah, 4
Yeah.
data we have. Let me call different endpoints. Let me copy this one. And here what I will do in, so we have to choose now get request. Okay. And instead of create, what we have to pass the endpoint
Yeah.
name, which we have created now. So that endpoint name is here. You can copy this one, get members simply. And you have to pass here get members. There is no other details are required. Since it's a get request, you don't need to pass body. We are not using any parameter. You can simply call it now. So you will see the status score is 200, and then you will receive this data from our database in this API. Can you see it?
Yeah.
So now we are receiving the
But if
all
we
object.
need to get detail for one member, then we have to pass the body, right?
For that also you can pass in your software in request parameter, because you have to pass only ID, correct?
Yes.
Let me show you that example quickly. Find member by ID, right?
Yes.
Find member by ID, and then what
MEM.
is, yeah, okay, sorry. And same you can keep here this, and here you have to pass one variable.
ID.
Yeah, request parameter. Now you have to pass a request parameter. So we will, why we, I will tell you the difference between request body and request parameter. Okay. String member ID. And here also you have to call another method. We have different method for get member by ID, remember?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And we have to pass this member, but in this method, you remember we are passing as a long. So we have to convert this integer into long first. Long dot value of, so there is one method value of, inside this you will pass this. Okay, so it is showing me error because this method will only return the one object, and the return type here we are using list. So I have to change this one as well. Okay. See, now there is no error. Okay. So again, I have to insert some details because we restarted server. Let me quickly add some records. 1, 2, and 3, 4th. We have 4 records now. We can verify like this. Here also, we can call it this API again. Yeah, we are getting these records again. 4 records. Let me copy this one this time, and we'll call our endpoints with 1 records. The endpoint name is find by member ID. There. Okay. And you can just simply put question mark. At question mark, you have to pass this request parameter name, member ID, and equal to the member ID detail. Now I wanted to get only one record. Okay. And I'll call it. See here, I'm getting one record only this time. If I pass second ID, I will get second ID. If I pass third ID,
Look,
yes.
can we pass the member ID in body instead of URL or no?
You can pass Sukir. You can pass. For that you have to create your payload, request payload.
Okay, okay.
You do it, no problem with that. You can pass in body, you can pass in path variable as well. There is one way also, path variable. So instead of putting this question mark, you can simply pass the slash, forward slash. So you want to see the passing the body also.
Yes.
Okay, let me create quickly. So let's create one now, one package class member, member request, member request payload. Here we will write like this, payload, inside payload, that is request. And here I will pass only one field, member private string member ID. That's it. And I have to create setter and getter. So now this will be our payload software. For this one ID as well, you want to pass this as a, let me create another for this, so you will understand both endpoints. And I'll keep this name as get member ID. Okay. Instead of find,
Yes.
I'll keep it as a get.
Get one.
Okay. And now we have to change some implementation here. Since we want to pass this object in body, so instead of request parent, we have to use request body. Okay. Here, request body. Then we have to use this our request payload here. And then, sorry. And now what you don't need to use like this now. Here now this is direct object, so you have to get that value from here. Let me change the name first. Member request payload. In the payload, you have to call, you have to get that member ID. Okay, get member ID like this. And now this implementation got changed, so I will add some quickly records here. Two records I can add. Two, one, added, second, me. So we have two records. Let me verify. Yeah, we have two records. So previously we were using this one, right? This is also working fine, but it is passing inside the request parameter. Now we'll change it. Let's copy this. But sorry. We have to change the mapping itself also. We cannot use get mapping for post. We have to use post here. Okay. Since we are passing some data in the post request. So I will again change. I will edit records. One, two. Let's verify.
We are getting the data from database. We are not inserting anything.
Yes, but you are passing post body, right?
Yes.
So in that scenario, you have to use post request, right? You're passing as an object. We'll try both. Okay, I'll show you the difference. If it can work, then we can see. But ideally, if you are passing some data in request body, you have to use post mapping. Okay. Get member by ID. I will use body, raw, JSON here. Here we have object, which object is member ID, right? We have to pass this. One. Let's see the record. Now we are passing in body. Okay. Instead of passing in URL, we are passing in body.
I mean, what is the difference passing in the body and the URL?
So if it is not a sensitive information, member
Oh.
ID, if it is not in sensitive information, you can directly pass in the URL parameter. Let's say if it is a sensitive information, you don't want to pass that information in URL, then
Yeah.
better to pass in body if
Okay.
it is a sensitive information. And coming to your question, Supir, let's try with get request. Okay. What will happen?
Yes.
First, I'll create records. 1, 2, and here 2 records should be here. Okay. This is fine. Now see, we changed the mapping, right? Now I'm using get instead of post. What will happen? It's working. So you can keep get also, and you can pass the post also.
Yes. Now I
Okay.
understand.
Okay. No problem. I think even I was not aware of this, but yeah, you can keep it. You can keep it as a get, and in the get also you can pass post body. Okay. So yeah, it's better. It's like get also and also passing in body. That is fine. So today we have created how many endpoints? Create, get members all, find by ID using the request parameter, get member ID by ID using the request body parameter. Now for you, there is one assignment: create delete API as well as get mapping for by ID. Instead of using request parameter, use path variables. So path variable, you will see the example here. If you want to see the example path variable, path param, you will see like this. So there are some things are available. You can refer those path param, path variable. So this is the syntax. Okay. I'll copy this link here for you as a reference. Not here. We are working on this side. Any doubt so far?
But only thing is,